My son Daniel was by her side when she told me they had been married for 4 months, and at that moment I knew I had lost more than just the chance to see him say "I do." I had lost the right to be his mother. The air left my lungs as if someone had ripped the ground from beneath my feet. The room spun. The candles on the table flickered, casting shadows that danced on the face of Simone, my secret daughter-in-law who watched me with unblinking eyes. Daniel continued talking, the words coming out hurriedly, nervously, trying to fill the silence that grew between us like an invisible wall. But I couldn't hear anything anymore. I could only see his lips moving, forming excuses that made no sense, justifications that sounded like betrayal. Let me tell you what led to this moment. My name is Lorraine. I am 62 years old. I have lived for 37 years in the same white wooden house in Asheville, where the wind still carries the scent of wet pine trees when it rains, where the porch still creaks in the same place, where I raised my only son alone after my husband died in a car accident one winter morning. Daniel was only 12 years old when he held my hand at the funeral and promised he would never leave me alone. It was just the two of us against the world, and for 22 years, that promise was the foundation of my life. Daniel was always reserved, but never distant. He would call every Wednesday at 8 o'clock at night. He would come for lunch on Sundays. He brought flowers for my birthday, always daisies, because he knew they reminded me of my mother. When he started working as a civil engineer, his first project was to renovate my kitchen. He spent 3 weekends installing the new cabinets, refusing any professional help because he wanted to do it himself. "For the most important woman in my life, eh?" he said when he finished, his face covered in sawdust and his eyes shining with pride. That's why when he called me 6 months ago, his voice different, lighter, saying he'd met someone special, my heart filled with joy. "Simone," he said. The name came from his lips like a prayer. 29 years old, graphic designer, intelligent, beautiful. "You'll love her, Mom," he promised. "When can I meet her?" I asked, already imagining family dinners, conversations on the porch, maybe grandchildren running through the garden. "Soon," he replied. "I want to be sure before introducing her. You understand, right?" I understood, or I thought I understood. The weeks passed. The Wednesday calls started to get delayed. Sometimes they arrived Thursday, Friday. Sometimes they didn't arrive at all. Sunday lunches became rarer. "Simone and I have plans," he would say. "Next Sunday, I promise." But next Sunday turned into the next and the next, until Sundays became just another empty day in my week. Before continuing, if you too have discovered a truth too late, check if you're subscribed. There are stories that only those who live through them understand. I tried not to feel rejected. I told myself it was natural, that he was in love, that every child needs to build their own life. But there was something in his tone that bothered me, a rush in the goodbyes, and discomfort when I mentioned Simone, as if her name were a secret he needed to keep, a treasure I could steal. 2 weeks ago, on a Tuesday morning, he called. His voice was different again, excited but hurried, like when he was a child and had broken something valuable. "Mom, I have important news. I proposed to Simone. She said yes." The tears came before I could hold them back, tears of joy, of relief, of hope. My boy was getting married. He was going to build a family. "I'm so proud," I managed to say between sobs. "When is it going to be? I need to help with the preparations. Oh, Daniel, I can't wait to meet her." "Saturday," he said. "Dinner at my house. 8 o'clock. Don't be late." I spent the whole week getting ready. I bought a new dress, navy blue, elegant, but not over the top. I didn't want to seem like I was trying too hard. I went to the salon, got my nails done, and chose a subtle perfume. I baked a lemon cake, Daniel's favorite, to bring as a gift. I rehearsed conversations in the mirror, trying to find the perfect balance between warm and respectful. I didn't want to be the intrusive mother-in-law from every young bride's nightmares. On Friday night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining what Simone would be like. Would she enjoy gardening as much as I do? Would she want children? Would she make my son happy? I woke up at 5 in the morning on Saturday, restless like a teenager before prom. The day dragged on. Each hour felt like 100 minutes. At 6, I started getting ready. By 7, I was ready, sitting in the living room armchair, the carefully wrapped cake on my lap, my hands sweating despite the air conditioning. At 7:30, I got in the car. The 20-minute drive to Daniel's apartment had never seemed so long. I parked in front of his building at 7:55. I took 3 deep breaths before getting out of the car. The doorman greeted me with his usual smile. "You look elegant today, Mrs. Lorraine." I thanked him, but my voice came out weak and nervous. The elevator went up too slowly. 3rd floor, 4th, 5th, 6th. The door opened and I walked down the familiar hallway, which suddenly seemed strange, hostile. Apartment 612. The small golden plaque shone under the fluorescent light. I rang the doorbell. Seconds dragged on. I heard footsteps. The lock turned. The door opened. Daniel looked different. His hair was shorter. His beard was trimmed. He wore a new shirt. But it was his smile that was wrong. Tense, forced, like a mask that didn't quite fit his face. He hugged me too quickly, pulling me inside before I could say anything. "Mom, come in. Simone is in the living room." The room was immaculate. Candles lit on the dining table, porcelain plates I didn't recognize, crystal glasses, and at the center of it all, like a queen on her throne, was Simone. She was beautiful, there was no doubt about it. Dark hair falling in perfect waves over her shoulders, fair, almost translucent skin, green eyes that measured me from head to toe in a fraction of a second, slim, elegant, dressed in black. She stood up when she saw me, but the movement was calculated, rehearsed. I reached out to embrace her. It was the custom, wasn't it? To embrace the future daughter-in-law, to welcome her to the family. But when my arms enveloped her, it was like embracing an ice statue. She remained rigid, her arms pressed against her body, tolerating my affection as if it were an invasion. "Nice to meet you, Lorraine," she said as I stepped away. Her voice was polite but empty. Lorraine. Not Mrs. Lorraine or Madam or even an affectionate mother-in-law. Just Lorraine, as if we were distant work colleagues. We sat down to dinner. Daniel served wine. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the glass. I tried to start a conversation, asking the questions I had rehearsed. "How did you two meet? How long have you been together? What exactly do you do as a designer?" Simone's answers were short and sharp. "In a cafe. A few months. I create visual identities." Each word seemed to be wrung from her with effort, as if talking to me was a burden she could barely bear. Daniel obsessively refilled my glass of water. He would interrupt the conversation with random comments about the weather, the traffic, anything except the obvious, that his fiancée hated me before she even met me. It was there, in the middle of a tasteless bite of a dish she couldn't identify, that Simone tilted her head slightly to the side, like a bird studying its prey, and said, "You still haven't told her?" Daniel's fork struck the plate with a sharp clinking sound. The sound reverberated through the room like an alarm bell. He turned pale, not white, pale with a greenish tint, like someone about to faint. "Tell me what?" I asked, although something inside me already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. Daniel took a deep breath. Once, twice, 3 times. His eyes met mine for a second before drifting to the napkin in his lap. "Mom, we're already married. We got married 4 months ago." The world stopped, not metaphorically. It literally stopped. The ticking of the clock on the wall fell silent. The hum of the refrigerator disappeared. Even the distant noise of the traffic outside ceased. All that remained was the echo of those impossible words ricocheting inside my head. "Married for 4 months. Is it true?" My voice came out as a whisper. Part of me still hoped it was a bad joke, that they would laugh and say it was a joke, that the wedding would be next year, that I would be the first to know. Daniel nodded without looking at me. "Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "Why didn't you tell me?" "It wasn't planned," he began, his words stumbling over each other. "It was something simple. Just the 2 of us at the registry office. We didn't want any pressure, you know. We were going to have a bigger party later, invite everyone." "Everyone," I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "But I'm not everyone, Daniel. I'm your mother." "I was going to tell you," he insisted. I swear I was, but it never seemed like the right time and— 4 months, I interrupted. You hid this from me for 4 months. All those Wednesdays, all those canceled lunches, all those times I asked about Simone and you. I couldn't finish. The words died in my throat along with 22 years of trust. I got up from the table. My legs felt like they were made of water, but somehow they supported me. I picked up my bag. The lemon cake remained untouched on the sideboard, a rejected offering for a son I apparently no longer knew. Mom, wait! Daniel stood up as well, his chair scraping on the floor. Please, let me explain. I need to go, I managed to say without turning around. If I looked at him, if I saw the face of the boy who once promised he would never leave me alone, I would crumble right there. He followed me to the door, tried to grab my arm. I dodged his touch as if I were burning. Mom, please. I left without saying anything more. The hallway seemed even longer on the way back. The elevator descended in slow motion. When I finally reached the car, my whole body was trembling. I drove the first 5 minutes on autopilot, tears blurring my vision. I had to stop at a gas station because I couldn't see the road anymore. I stood there in the empty parking lot, crying like I hadn't cried since the day of my husband's funeral. But these weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of betrayal, of humiliation, of a pain so deep it felt physical, as if someone had ripped a piece from my chest and left a hole that would never be filled. My son had married without me. He had excluded me from the most important moment of his life. He had chosen a stranger instead of the woman who raised him, who sacrificed everything for him, who loved him unconditionally for 34 years. And worst of all, he had lied. For 4 months, he looked me in the eye and lied. When I finally managed to drive home, the house was dark and silent. I turned on the lights, but they seemed too dim to dispel the shadows that had settled in the corners. I sat in the living room armchair, still wearing my new dress, still with the makeup I had chosen so carefully, and stared into the emptiness. The house that had been my sanctuary for 37 years now felt like a prison. Every corner held a memory of Daniel. The mark on the wall where we measured his height, the stain on the carpet from when he spilled grape juice at age 5, the crooked shelf he had installed at 15, insisting he could do it himself. It was there, in that armchair, listening to the familiar creaking of the balcony in the night wind, that I realized I was no longer welcome in my own son's life. The following days passed in a blur of missed calls and unanswered messages. Daniel showed up at my door the following Wednesday. His face was gaunt, his eyes red. He seemed to have aged years and days. "Can we talk?" he asked. I let him in because, despite everything, he was still my son. We sat in the living room, him on the sofa where he used to watch cartoons, me in the armchair where I read him bedtime stories. The distance between us seemed insurmountable. Simone was scared, he began without preamble. Her family is complicated. Her previous mother-in-law was cruel to her. She was traumatized. She asked us to keep it a secret until she felt safe. "And you accepted?" Wasn't a question. "I love her, Mom. I wanted to protect her." "And me?" My voice came out louder than I intended. "Who protected me, Daniel? Who protected the woman who gave up everything to raise you? Who worked 2 jobs to pay for your college? Who held your hand through every difficult moment of your life?" He didn't answer. There was no answer that could fix what was broken. "You erased me," I continued, the words spilling out like blood from a wound. "You eliminated me from your life as if I were an inconvenience, a problem to be managed, a shame to hide from. That's not how it works. So how is it? Explain to me, Daniel, what it's like to love someone and hide the most important thing in your life from them. Explain what it's like to look at your mother every week for 4 months and lie." He started to cry. Silent tears streamed down my grown-up boy's face. For a moment, I almost gave in. I almost pulled him into my arms like I used to when he was little and the world was simple. But it was no longer small, and the world would never be simple again. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "Me too," I replied. And it was true. I felt very sorry for both of us. He left shortly after, promising that things would get better, that I would get to know Simone better, that everything would work out, but his words sounded empty, like echoes in an abandoned cave. The following weeks confirmed my worst fears. I tried to get closer, suggested dates, offered help with their new married life, but there was always an excuse. Simone was busy. They were traveling. They needed space. When she called Daniel, she always heard her voice in the background. He spoke softly, hurriedly, like a prisoner under surveillance. The Wednesday calls ceased completely. The Sunday lunches became a distant memory. It was my neighbor Diane who told me what she had witnessed at the market. She hesitated before speaking, her eyes filled with pity. "She said you would be a problem," Diane revealed gently. I overheard. Daniel didn't say anything. The confirmation of what I already suspected hurt more than it should have. I was being systematically removed from my son's life, and he was allowing it. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was temporary. Maybe Simone needed time to adjust. Maybe I was being paranoid, seeing conspiracies where there were only natural adjustments to a new life. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had lost my son the moment he secretly said yes to her, in that registry office I would never see, in that ceremony from which I was deliberately excluded. Silence settled between us like a physical presence. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The house that once echoed with his laughter now reverberated only with the ticking of the clock and the creaking of the floorboards under my solitary footsteps. I began to age in that silence, not just in years, but in spirit. Each day, without news of him, was a strand of hair turning gray, a wrinkle deepening, a piece of hope dying. I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror one Tuesday morning, not recognizing the woman staring back at me. Her eyes were the same, but there was an opacity to them that hadn't been there before, like dusty windows in an abandoned house. The garden, which had always been my pride, began to wither. The roses that Daniel helped me prune every autumn wilted without care. The vegetable garden where we planted tomatoes together was overtaken by weeds. It was as if nature itself knew that something fundamental had changed. Sometimes, late at night, I'd pick up the phone and dial his number. I'd sit there, my finger hovering over the call button, imagining what I'd say if he answered. But I always gave up. What was there to say that hadn't already been said in the deafening silence between us? Diane tried to cheer me up. She invited me for tea, suggested outings, tried to include me in her reading groups, but I politely declined. How could I explain that it wasn't company I needed, but my son's? How could I make someone understand the specific void left by a child you carried, raised, and loved, and who now treats you like a stranger? It was on one of those lonely afternoons, while I was organizing old photographs, that the phone rang. The number was unknown, but something made me answer. "Mrs. Lorraine?" A female voice, tired but firm. "Try?" "My name is Beatrice. I am Simone's mother. We need to talk." The meeting was scheduled for the next day, at a coffee shop in the city center. I arrived early, chose a table in the corner, and ordered a tea that sat untouched while I waited. Beatrice arrived punctually. She was a tough woman with the kind of rigidity that comes not from strength, but from the exhaustion of carrying burdens that are too heavy for too long. Her eyes were older and sadder versions of Simone's. She didn't waste time on niceties. "Your daughter-in-law was married before," she said without preamble, "at 24, to a man named Kevin." I held the cup of cold tea between my hands, needing something solid to anchor myself to. "The marriage lasted a year," Beatrice continued. "During that time, she convinced Kevin that his family was toxic, that his mother was possessive, that his siblings were envious, that he needed to choose." I didn't want to hear the rest, but I couldn't move. Kevin chose her. He cut off contact with everyone. When Simone filed for divorce a year later, saying she had been wrong about him, Kevin was left alone. His family, it took them a long time to forgive him. Some never forgave him. "Why are you telling me this?" My voice came out hoarse. Beatrice stared at me with those tired eyes. "Because I see the same pattern repeating itself. Because I failed to protect Kevin and his family. Because She hesitated for the first time. Because you still have time. We left the cafeteria in silence. Before saying goodbye, Beatrice touched my arm lightly. Simone is my daughter and I love her, she said, but she has an unhealthy need to be the center of someone's universe, and she won't rest until she eliminates any competition. Beatrice's words followed me home like ghosts. I sat on the porch despite the cold, observing the dead garden, processing the information. Part of me wanted to deny it, wanted to believe that Daniel was different, that our bond was too strong to be broken. But the evidence was right in front of me, in the unanswered calls, in the canceled lunches, in the secret wedding, in the silence that grew stronger every day. I didn't know it yet, but that silence would be my weapon. The decision to act didn't come like a bolt of lightning, but like the dawn, slow, inevitable, gradually illuminating the path ahead. I couldn't force Daniel to choose me. She couldn't compete with Simone for his love, but she could do something neither of them expected. She could wait and observe and be ready. 2 weeks later, Kevin called me. His voice was that of someone who had survived a war and still carried shrapnel under his skin. "Beatrice gave me your number," he explained. "She said you needed to know how Simone operates." We talked for an hour. Kevin confirmed everything Beatrice had said and more. Simone was a master of subtle manipulation. She never demanded directly. She simply created situations where the only loving choice was to distance himself from his family. Small comments about how his mother treated him like a child, sighs when he mentioned his siblings, convenient tears when family events approached. "The worst part," Kevin said before hanging up, "is that you start to believe you're protecting her, that you're being a good husband, until the day you wake up alone and realize you traded everyone who loved you for someone who only loved control." Armed with knowledge but without a clear plan, I did the only thing I could. I called Daniel and invited the couple to lunch. My voice was calm, almost casual. I said I wanted to make peace, that I had prepared his favorite dish. The silence on the other end of the line stretched on so long that I thought he had hung up. "I'll ask Simone," he finally said. 2 days later, he called back. They would come on Sunday. I spent the week preparing, not just the food, but myself. I mentally rehearsed every word, every gesture. I couldn't seem desperate. I couldn't give Simone ammunition to paint me as the problematic mother-in-law. Sunday arrived gray and cold. I prepared lunch with the same care as always, but my heart wasn't in the dishes. It was in the delicate trap I needed to set. Not to destroy, but to reveal. They arrived on time. Daniel looked thinner, with deep dark circles under his eyes. Simone wore a red dress that made her look like a bloodstain against the cloudy sky. Lunch started tensely. I kept the conversation light, talking about the weather, neighborhood news, anything but the elephant in the room. Simone answered monosyllabically, clearly bored. Daniel barely touched his food. It was when I served dessert that I made my move. "Daniel," I began, my voice soft as velvet, "do you remember the day your father died?" He froze with the spoon halfway to his mouth. Simone frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the change of subject. "You were 12 years old," I continued, not expecting an answer. "I held your hand all day. You cried so much, I thought you were going to drown in your own tears. And then, that night, after everyone had left, you looked at me with those swollen eyes and made a promise." Daniel put down the spoon. A single tear rolled down his face. "You said, Mom, I promise I'll never leave you alone. We'll take care of each other forever, remember?" "I remember," he whispered. "I never called you into that promise," I continued. "I never used it against you. When you went to college, I celebrated. When you got your first job in another city, I helped you move. When you met Simone, I was happy. Do you know why?" He shook his head negatively. "Because true love doesn't imprison. It doesn't demand impossible choices. It doesn't build walls. True love wants to see the loved one fly, even if it's far away." Simone shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I ignored her, keeping my eyes on Daniel. But there's a difference between flying and being caged. between building a new life and demolishing the old one, between loving someone and letting that someone isolate you from everyone who came before. You're being dramatic, Simone interrupted, her voice sharp as broken glass. I turned to her for the first time since she had started speaking. Hello? Tell me, Simone, when was the last time Daniel saw his college friends? When was the last time he mentioned his cousin Roberto, with whom he grew up? When was the last time he did something, anything, without asking your permission first? That's ridiculous, she retorted, but there was something defensive about her stance. Really? I kept my voice level. Then why did you tell Diane I would be a problem? Why was the wedding a secret? Why is every attempt I make to get closer blocked? Mom, Daniel tried to intervene. No, I interrupted gently. I need to say this. Simone, I know about Kevin. Her face lost all color. For a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw the panic in her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice trembled. I know about the marriage, about how he was estranged from his family, about how it ended, and I know you're doing the same thing to my son. Daniel looked at Simone, confusion and something else, perhaps the beginning of understanding on his face. Is that true? He asked. Were you married before? It was a long time ago, she said quickly. It doesn't mean anything. How could our secret marriage mean nothing? He interrupted her. How could the calls you ask me not to answer mean nothing? How could the fact that I haven't seen my friends in months mean nothing? Daniel, love, you're distorting everything. I am? At that moment, I realized they never fooled me. I only pretended not to see, because part of me always knew. From that first phone call 6 months ago when Daniel's voice changed, from the first canceled lunches, from the moment he said her name like a prayer, I felt the danger approaching. But I chose to believe in the best. I chose to trust that the love we built over 34 years would be strong enough. I chose to close my eyes because opening them would mean admitting that I was losing my son. I need some air, Daniel said suddenly, standing up. Where are you going? Simone asked, her voice high-pitched. Go for a walk. I'll go with you. No, he said firmly. I need to think. Alone. Daniel, if you walk out that door now... What? He turned to face her. What's going to happen, Simone? Are you going to leave me? Like you left Kevin? She didn't answer. Daniel left, leaving us, 2 women who loved him in completely different ways, facing each other across the carefully set table. You destroyed everything, Simone hissed as the door closed. No, I replied calmly. I only showed what was already broken. She stood up abruptly and grabbed her bag. He'll come back to me, she said. They always do. Perhaps, I admitted, but this time it will be a choice, not manipulation. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving me alone with the dirty dishes and the silence. But it was a different kind of silence, not the emptiness of absence, but the quiet that comes after the storm. Daniel returned an hour later. He found me on the balcony, watching the dead garden. May I sit down? He asked. I nodded. He settled into the chair next to me where his father used to sit on summer evenings. I'm sorry, he said after a long silence. I know. No, Mom. I'm truly sorry for everything, for the secret marriage, for the lies, for letting her take me away from you, for breaking my promise. You were 12 years old when you made that promise, I said gently. You can't live your life based on words spoken by a grieving child. But the feeling behind them was real, he insisted. The love was real. It is real. I just got lost. We all get lost sometimes, I replied. The important thing is to find our way back. What if it's too late? What if I've ruined everything? I took his hand. It was cold, trembling slightly. It's never too late between mother and son, not while both are alive and willing to try. He squeezed my hand and cried, not the silent tears of before, but deep sobs that came from a broken place inside him. I pulled him into my arms as I hadn't done in years, and he let himself be embraced. What do I do now? He asked when the tears dried. You decide what you want, I replied. But this time, let it be your decision. Not mine, not hers, yours. Daniel stayed with me that night. He slept in his old room, surrounded by faded posters and dusty trophies. In the morning, I made pancakes, the same ones we used to make together on Saturdays when he was a child. I'm going to talk to Simone today, he said between bites. I'm going to tell her I need some time, that we need therapy if we want to have any chance. She won't like it. I know, but if she truly loves me, she'll understand, and if not— He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. The following months were difficult. Simone fought with every weapon she had: tearful phone calls, manipulative messages. She even showed up at my door once, accusing me of stealing her husband. I didn't steal anything, I told her that day. I just refused to let my son be stolen from me. Daniel stood firm. He insisted on therapy. He insisted on rebuilding the relationships he had neglected. He insisted on finding a balance between being a husband and being a son. Simone couldn't accept it. For her, love meant total possession or nothing. When she realized that Daniel would never again be the isolated man she could control, she filed for divorce. It was painful for him. Despite everything, he loved her, or loved who he thought she was. But with each therapy session, with each honest conversation with me, he began to see the pattern, the subtle manipulation, the gradual isolation, the conditional love disguised as devotion. The divorce was finalized one spring morning. Daniel came straight from the courthouse to my house. He was downcast, but there was something different about him, a lightness I hadn't seen in a long time. "How are you feeling?" I asked as we drank tea on the veranda. "Free," he said after thinking. "Sad, but free." "And now?" "Now," he took a deep breath. "I'm learning to be myself again. And I promise, not like that 12-year-old boy, but like the man I am now, that I will never again let anyone take me away from the people I love." I didn't need to punish them. The truth did that for me. The truth about who Simone really was. The truth about what Daniel had allowed to happen. The truth about the price of choosing isolation instead of integration. Beatrice called me a few months later. Simone had met another man. History repeating itself like a broken record. She sounded even more tired than before. "At least this time his family was notified," she said bitterly. Kevin also got in touch to express his gratitude. He said that knowing he wasn't alone, that he wasn't the only one who had gone through that, somehow helped. "You saved your son," he said. "I wish someone had saved me." But I knew the truth. I hadn't saved Daniel. I had only illuminated the path. He chose to walk it. Today, 2 years after that fateful dinner, life has found a new rhythm. Daniel comes to lunch every Sunday again. Sometimes he brings friends. Recently, he's been bringing a woman named Clara, a kind teacher who insists on helping me in the kitchen and tells funny stories about her own parents. "Don't rush things," I advised him when he mentioned being in love. "Meet her family, let her meet yours. Build something together, not in secret." The garden has bloomed again. With Daniel's help, we pruned the roses in the fall and planted tomatoes in the spring. It's a shared effort, as it should be. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment at the dinner table when I found out about the secret marriage. The pain still echoes like an old scar that aches when time changes. But I don't regret anything. Because in the end, what seemed like a tragedy was actually a gift. The chance to rebuild our relationship on more honest grounds. The opportunity for Daniel to learn about boundaries and choices. Proof that true love survives the truth, however painful it may be. Simone was right about one thing. I was a problem, but not the problem she thought. I was the problem for her isolation plans, the obstacle to her total control, the inconvenient reminder that Daniel existed before her and would continue to exist after. And that's the lesson I carry with me. Sometimes being a problem is exactly what our children need us to be. Not the kind of problem that suffocates or controls, but the kind that remains firm, that refuses to be erased, that loves enough to speak hard truths. Sitting on this same balcony where it all began and ended and began again, I watch the sun set over the pine trees. The wind still carries the scent of rain. The balcony still creaks in the same place. But something fundamental has changed. I no longer live alone with memories. I live with the renewed presence of my son, with the promise fulfilled in ways that neither of us could have imagined on that terrible day 25 years ago. Daniel was right. He never left me alone. He just needed to get lost to understand the true meaning of being together. And me? I've learned that silence can be a weapon, but the truth is the only victory that matters. They took everything from me, and yet, in the end, I was the one who kept the truth. But let me return to that crucial moment, to the Sunday of the confrontation, because there are details that need to be told, nuances that only now, with the distance of time, can I see clearly. When Daniel went for a walk, leaving Simone and me alone in that tension-filled room, the initial silence was thick as molasses. She drummed her nails on the table, perfectly manicured nails, blood red, each one like a small weapon. I watched her movements, the way her eyes calculated her next move, like a chess player assessing the board. "You don't understand," she said finally, her voice low but vibrating with a restrained intensity. "You'll never understand what it's like to be judged before you even open your mouth. What it's like to enter a family and know they've already decided you're not good enough." "But I began. "Not you, specifically," she cut me off. "But mothers like you, mothers who raise their children alone, who think no one will ever be good enough, who see any woman as a threat to their reign." There was truth in her words, a truth that hurt to acknowledge. How many times had I heard stories from friends about difficult daughters-in-law, about how sons changed after marriage? How many times had I myself felt a pang in my chest imagining Daniel starting his own family? "You're right," I admitted, and I saw surprise flash across her face like lightning. "I probably would have been a difficult mother-in-law, too protective, too present. That's my flaw, loving too much, holding on too tightly." Simone relaxed slightly, thinking she had gained ground. "But," I continued, "there's a difference between being difficult and being excluded, between needing adjustments and being erased. You didn't even give me the chance to be difficult, Simone. You eliminated me before we even started. I was protecting myself," she said, but the conviction was escaping her voice like air from a punctured balloon. "About what? About a 62-year-old woman who just wanted to meet the person her son loved? About someone who bought a new dress and baked a lemon cake because she was too nervous to show up empty-handed?" She looked away, and in that moment I saw, not the cold manipulator Beatrice had described, but a deeply wounded woman, repeating patterns that perhaps even she didn't fully understand. "Your previous mother-in-law," I ventured. "What was she like?" Simone laughed, but it was a joyless sound. "Perfect. Beautiful, rich, influential. Nothing I did was ever good enough. My cooking was too simple. My clothes were wrong. My work was inferior. She made a point of reminding me at every family dinner that Kevin could have done better." "So, you made him choose." "That's not how it was," she protested, but weakly. "I just needed to know that he would choose me, that I was more important than her criticism." "And when did he choose you?" "I realized it wasn't enough," she whispered. "That even without her there, I could still hear the criticism. I still felt inadequate. The problem was never her, it was—" She stopped, unable or unwilling to finish. "It was you," I added gently. "The problem was how you saw yourself." Tears began to form in her eyes, but she held them back with the strength of someone who has learned that crying is a sign of weakness. "And now you're doing the same thing with Daniel," I continued, "not because I'm like Kevin's mother, but because you don't know how to exist in a relationship without creating an external enemy, without having someone to blame when things get tough. You know nothing about me," she said, but it was a weak protest. "I know you're 29 years old and have already gone through a divorce. I know you convinced my son to get married in secret. I know that in 6 months you managed to distance him from everyone who loved him. And I know that deep down you must be profoundly unhappy." She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping on the floor. "Happiness," she spat out the word. "What do you know about happiness? Living alone in this house, clinging to the past, smothering your son with your needs?" "I know," I replied calmly, "that happiness isn't built on lies. It isn't sustained by control, and it certainly doesn't grow in isolation." She grabbed the bag with jerky movements. "Daniel will have to choose. Me or you." "No." I stood up as well, facing her. "That's the choice you offer. I offer another. He can have both of us. He can love his wife and his mother. He can build a family without destroying the other. The question, Simone, is, can you accept that?" She left without answering, but the way she slammed the door was answer enough. Daniel returned an hour later, as I said. But what I didn't recount were the details of that hour. How I walked through the empty house, touching familiar objects like talismans. The picture frame with his graduation photo, the crooked vase he made in pottery class when he was 10, the height mark on the door frame that we stopped updating when he turned 18. Each object told a story. Each mark on the wall was a chapter of our life together, and as I waited, I wondered if those memories would be all I had left. When I heard the key in the door, he still had the key. That detail gave me hope. My heart raced like it hadn't since that night in the hospital when he had appendicitis at age 15. He entered slowly, as if unsure if he was welcome. His hair was tousled by the wind, his cheeks red from the cold. He seemed to have aged years in that hour's walk. "She left?" he asked. "About an hour ago." He nodded, as if he had expected it. He went to the kitchen and poured himself some coffee, the same coffee I had made for 30 years, strong and unsweetened, just the way his father liked it. "Do you remember when Dad died?" he said suddenly, still with his back to me. "Every detail." "I was so angry," he continued, "angry at him for driving that morning, angry at the truck driver, angry at God, angry at you for not being able to bring him back." "I know. It was normal to feel that way." He turned around, the untouched coffee in his hand. "But you never let me stay angry. You never let it consume me. You taught me to transform it into something different, into determination, into love, into purpose. You were a child. You needed guidance." "And now?" he asked. And suddenly I saw the 12-year-old boy in the eyes of the 34-year-old man. "What do I do with this anger, Mom, with this feeling that I've ruined everything?" "Come," I said, guiding him to the balcony. "Let's sit down." We settled into the rocking chairs, the same ones where your father and I used to spend summer evenings. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple that looked like blood, diluted in water. "You didn't ruin everything," I began. "You fell in love. You trusted. You tried to build something. That's never wrong, Daniel." "But the choices I made, these were the choices of someone who was learning. Simone is persuasive and charismatic. She knows exactly which buttons to push, which fears to exploit. You are not the first, nor will you be the last, to fall into this trap." "Kevin," he said. "She told me about him. Not everything, but enough." And I saw the future," he admitted. "I saw where I would be in a year, 2 years, alone. Without you, without my friends, without anyone but her. And when she inevitably got tired of me, you would be left with nothing. Worse," he corrected. "I wouldn't even know who I am." We stood in silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of dusk. Crickets beginning their symphony, the wind whispering through the leaves, a dog barking in the distance. "Do you know what hurts the most?" he finally asked. "What?" "That I let it happen, that I saw the signs and ignored them. Every friend she criticized, I distanced myself from. Every time you called and she rolled her eyes, I took longer to call back. Every tradition of ours that she thought was silly, I abandoned. And the worst part, I thought I was being mature, independent, a good husband." "You were being manipulated," I corrected gently. There's a difference. But I should have realized. I'm a grown man, not a child. Daniel, I leaned forward, taking his hands in mine. People much older and more experienced than you have been manipulated. That doesn't make you weak or stupid. It makes you human. He shook my hands, and I felt the calluses from work, the scars of a life built with effort. What do I say to her? He asked. How do I end this without destroying her? You're not responsible for her destruction, I replied. Simone carries her own ruins. What you can do is be honest, kind, and firm. Say you need space, that the marriage needs professional help if it has any chance. What if she doesn't accept? Then you'll have your answer about what kind of love she offers. He nodded slowly, processing it. The coffee in his hand had cooled completely, but he took a sip anyway, grimacing. I'll stay here today, he said, if it's not a problem. Your room is always ready. Mother? Try? Thank you for not giving up, for forcing me to see, for... He hesitated, searching for the words, for loving me enough to risk losing me. I felt the tears welling up, but I let them fall. I had cried so much from sadness in the last few months that crying tears of relief felt like a blessing. That night, I prepared dinner while Daniel took a shower. I heard the water running and was transported back 20 years to when he would come home from school covered in mud after playing soccer. The house seemed alive again, breathing with his presence. When he came downstairs, wearing an old t-shirt he still kept in the closet, he looked younger, lighter, as if taking the clothes out of the apartment he shared with Simone would also take away the weight of those months. We ate in comfortable silence, not the heavy silence of recent times, but the kind that comes from mutual understanding. Between bites, he would release fragments of memories. Remember that time we tried to make pizza and the dough stuck to the ceiling? You insisted on playing it up in the air like in the movies. Or when we built that treehouse and it fell down the next day, your father would have known to use the right nails. But we tried. We always try. After dinner, we washed the dishes together, me washing, him drying, just like we used to do before he grew up and life got complicated. The simplicity of the act was comforting. Warm water, lemon-scented soap, the clinking of the porcelain, domestic rituals that sustain sanity. I'll call her tomorrow, he said as he put away the last plate. Ask to talk. Suggest couples therapy. That's a good approach. Do you think she'll accept? I thought of Simone, of her calculating eyes, of her need for control. No, I replied honestly, but you need to try. He nodded, resigned. And what if she refuses? Then you'll know you did your part. We went into the living room. Daniel sank into the old sofa, the same one where he used to watch cartoons on Saturday mornings. I turned on the bedside lamp, creating a circle of golden light that enveloped us like a cocoon. Tell me about the last few months, I asked. What did I miss? And he told me. About the bridge project he was supervising, about the new colleague who had a habit of singing in the office, about the day he rescued an abandoned dog at the construction site and found it a home. Little stories I should have heard on Wednesday phone calls, at Sunday lunches. With each story, I felt the distance shrinking. The son I knew was still there, just buried under layers of guilt and confusion. And Simone? I asked eventually. How was it in the beginning? He thought before answering. Intense. Everything with her was intense. The first meeting lasted 8 hours. We talked about everything, or so I thought. I only realized later that she talked a lot but said little. I left knowing that she loved sushi and hated rain, but I knew nothing about her family, her fears, her real dreams. But you fell in love. I fell in love with the idea of her, he corrected. With the woman she portrayed. Beautiful, mysterious. Always saying exactly what I wanted to hear. It was only when we were already living together that the mask began to slip. Like this? Small things at the beginning. Comments about my friends being immature, suggestions that I could dress better, questions about why I needed to call you every week. Nothing aggressive, always wrapped in concern. I just want what's best for you, love. And you believed it. Why wouldn't I believe her? She was my wife. She should want what was best for me, right? The innocence in her voice broke my heart. It was when she suggested a civil wedding that I should have realized, he continued. She said it would be more romantic, just the two of us, without the stress of a big party, that we could save up for a special honeymoon. It made sense at the time. Manipulators always make sense, I observed. That's why they're effective. But getting married without you there... He shook his head. How could I find that acceptable? How could I look at her saying yes and not miss you? Because she had created a world where my presence was a problem, not a blessing, where loving me was seen as weakness, not strength. He covered his face with his hands. I'm an idiot. He's a man who loved with an open heart, I corrected. That's never foolishness. It's courage. The problem isn't your capacity to love, Daniel. It's that you loved someone who saw your love as a tool, not as a gift. We stayed up talking late, filling the voids of the last few months. When the clock struck midnight, he yawned and got up. I'm going to sleep. Tomorrow is the day to face reality. Daniel? Try? No matter what happens tomorrow, you will always have a home here. He hugged me then, a long, tight hug that said all the words we couldn't pronounce. I know, Mom. I always knew. I just forgot for a while. I followed him upstairs, turning off the lights along the way. I stopped at his bedroom door, watching him settle into the single bed that seemed far too small for his adult frame. Good evening, champion, he said, using his childhood nickname. Good night, Mom. I went to my room but couldn't fall asleep right away. I lay there in the dark, listening to the sounds of the house, sounds that were different now that Daniel was there. The specific creaking of the floorboards in his room when he moved in bed. The hum of the fan he always turned on, even in winter. Sounds of home. Sounds of family. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon. I went downstairs and found Daniel in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. I thought you deserved to be pampered a little, he said without turning around. How long have you been awake? Since 5 o'clock. I couldn't sleep anymore. I sat on the stool by the kitchen island, the same one he had installed, and watched him cook. His movements were efficient, practical, an engineer even in the way he cracked eggs. Nervous? I asked. Terrified, he admitted, but it's a necessary fear. We ate together, the crispy bacon, the perfect eggs. Daniel had even cut fruit, arranging it on his plate just like I used to do when he was a child. I remembered you always said that a nice breakfast makes the day better, he explained, almost embarrassed. And you always complained that food is just food. I was a teenage idiot. He was a normal teenager. After coffee, he took another long shower. I could hear the water running while he washed the dishes, and I wondered if he was rehearsing what he would say to Simone. I knew my son. He needed scripts, plans, structure. When he came downstairs, he was dressed in clothes I recognized. Old jeans and a plaid shirt that had been in the closet for years. Nothing like the apartment with Simone. I'll call from here, he said. I need to be in neutral territory. Do you want privacy? No. Do you want to stick around? Not to listen, just to be here? Of course. He went out onto the balcony with the phone. I stayed in the living room, pretending to read a book, but paying close attention to every nuance of the conversation I could catch. His tone started out calm, measured, then it became firmer, then silent for long periods. 20 minutes later, he returned. His face was pale, but there was determination in his eyes. And then? She said therapy is for weak couples, that if I truly loved her, we wouldn't need strangers interfering in our lives. Oh, Daniel. Wait, there's more. I said the problem is you, that you manipulated me yesterday, that you planted ideas in my head, that... He paused, taking a deep breath. That you're a bitter old woman who can't stand to see her son happy. The cruelty of the words hit me like slaps. She doesn't know me, I managed to say. Exactly, Daniel said with a firmness that surprised me. She doesn't know you because she never wanted to. She never asked a real question about you. She never showed any curiosity about the woman who raised me. And do you know what I realized while she was yelling? What? That she was describing her own mother. Beatrice called me last week. I didn't answer right away, but I heard the message. She sounded exactly like Simone was sounding now, bitter, angry, blaming the world. Psychology has a term for that. Projection, he finished. Yes, I've been reading, trying to understand. And what did you say to her? That I needed some time, that I was going to stay here for a few days to think, that when I returned we could talk about the future. How did she react? He said that if I went out that door, it was best not to come back. My heart froze. And you? I had already left through the door, Mom. I told her I respected her decision and hung up. The silence that followed was dense but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of a decision made, of a page turned. And now? I asked gently. Now. He took a deep breath. I'll figure out how to undo a marriage that should never have happened. And then, he looked at me with a small smile. Then I'll learn to be myself again. The following days were a mix of practical and emotional. Daniel contacted a lawyer. He discovered that, ironically, the fact that the marriage had been so secret made some things easier. Few shared assets, separate accounts, and even the apartment wasn't in both their names. She always insisted on keeping the finances separate, he told me. She said it was more modern. Now I see it was more about control. She could go out whenever she wanted without complications. Between phone calls with lawyers and trips to the apartment to pick up her things, always when Simone was at work, there were moments of restored normalcy. Dinners together, TV shows we hadn't watched in months, conversations about everything and nothing. One night, while we were watching a documentary about bridges, Daniel has always been fascinated by structures. He said something that stuck with me. Do you know what I learned from this whole situation? What? The strongest structures are those that have flexibility, those that can adapt to the wind without breaking. I tried to build my marriage like a fortress, isolated and rigid, but you, he gestured to the house around us, you built our family like a bridge, strong but flexible, connecting instead of isolating. An engineer even in his metaphors, I joked, but I was touched. Seriously, I've spent my whole life studying how to build things that last, and the most lasting thing in my life, our relationship, I almost destroyed by not understanding its basic principles. What are they? Trust, communication, and space to grow without drifting apart. Daniel's words proved prophetic in the weeks that followed. Simone didn't make the divorce easy. There were dramatic messages, attempts at reconciliation, followed by cruel attacks, even a surprise appearance at my door. It was a rainy Thursday. Daniel was at work. He'd gone back to his routine, staying in my guest room while he looked for a new place. I was in the covered garden, trying to save some seedlings when the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there she was. Simone, soaked from the rain, her makeup smudged, looking much younger than her 29 years. We need to talk, she said without preamble. My first instinct was to close the door, but something in his eyes, genuine despair, made me hesitate. Come in, he said finally. I'll get a towel. She came in, dripping onto my wooden floor, and for the first time didn't seem to calculate every move. When I returned with the towel, she was standing in the middle of the room, looking at the family photos on the wall. He seemed happy, she said, pointing to a photo of Daniel at age 8, missing his front teeth, holding a fish he had caught. He was happy. He is happy. Happiness is not a permanent state, Simone. It comes and goes like the tides. She accepted the towel but didn't use it, just held it like a child holds a blanket. I messed everything up, she said suddenly. I always mess everything up. Sitting down would help, I suggested, indicating the sofa. She sat on the edge, tense as a bird about to fly. Why do you do this? I asked directly. Why do you push people away from each other? She looked at me in surprise. Perhaps she expected accusations, not genuine questions. I don't know, she admitted after a long silence. It's like I need to prove that I'm special, that I'm the chosen one. And the only way to prove that is by eliminating all other options. But that's not love. That's possession. I know, she whispered. I know that rationally. But when I'm in a relationship, it's like something takes over. I become obsessed with being the center of attention, with being everything. And when does he succeed? I feel empty, she admitted, because deep down I know it's not real, that I forced it, that I manipulated it. And then I look for someone new and start all over again. It was the most honest confession I could have hoped for. You need professional help, she said gently, not another relationship. Real help. Daniel said the same thing. Daniel is wise. He's good, she corrected. Too good for me. No one is too good for anyone else, I retorted. But sometimes people aren't ready for each other. You're not ready for the kind of love Daniel offers. Love that includes instead of excluding. She finally used the towel, drying her face. When she finished, she looked even younger, more vulnerable. I envy you both, she said. The ease with which you get along, the history, the inside jokes. I never had that with my mother. It's still possible. No, some burned bridges cannot be rebuilt. But others can be built from scratch. She stood up to leave. At the door, she turned around. Take care of him, she asked. I've always cared. I always will, but not in the way you think, not by smothering or controlling. Caring sometimes means letting go. It means trusting. It means being present without being intrusive. She nodded and walked out into the rain without looking back. When Daniel arrived home that night, I told him about the visit. He listened silently, processing it. Do you think she'll seek help? He asked when I finished. I hope so. For her sake, not for ours. It's strange, he said. I still care about her. I don't love her anymore, not like I used to, but I want her to be okay. That's maturity and compassion, characteristics you haven't lost despite everything. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Simone did not contest it. According to Daniel's lawyer, she was cooperative, almost in a hurry to finish everything. She met someone, Daniel told me after signing the papers. A guy from her work. She's already living with him. How do you feel about that? Relieved, he admitted, and a little sad for the guy. But there was a lightness in her voice, the lightness of someone who had gotten rid of a weight she didn't even know she was carrying. Daniel found a new apartment a month later, smaller than the previous one, but with large windows and plenty of light. I spent the day helping with the move, unwrapping dishes, hanging pictures, making his space a home. It's not much, he said, as we organized the books. It's yours. It's a start. It's enough. He had kept some things from our time apart. The family photos that Simone had relegated to a box in the closet now decorated the living room. The crooked vase from pottery class had gained a place of honor on the shelf. Small acts of self-discovery. On the first Sunday after the move, he showed up for lunch. He brought flowers, daisies as always, and a bottle of wine. To the new beginning, he toasted. Through new beginnings, I corrected, always in the plural. Life is full of them. And so we created new routines. Wednesday calls returned, now via video so I could see his face. Sunday lunches became sacred again, but there were changes too. Daniel was more open, more present. He shared more, kept less to himself. I'm in therapy, he told me at one of those lunches, trying to understand how I let it happen, how I got so lost. And I'm discovering that I have patterns too, that I chose someone who was emotionally unavailable because, in a way, they were familiar, safe. Like this? After my father died, I learned not to expect too much emotionally from people, to be self-sufficient, to not bother them with my needs. Simone seemed perfect because she didn't demand real vulnerability, only obedience. That's too deep for Sunday lunch, I joked, but I was proud of him for doing the inner work. My therapist said humor is my defense mechanism, he retorted with a smile. She knows the family well then. 6 months after the divorce, life had found a new rhythm. Daniel was thriving at work, had rekindled old friendships, and had even joined a running club. 40 kilometers in next month's marathon, he announced proudly. I'll be at the finish line, I promised. Mother, try? Thank you for everything, for not giving up on me. I will never give up on you. But Daniel, try. Thank you for not giving up on yourself either. It was at one of those Sunday lunches, almost a year after that fateful dinner, that Daniel brought someone over. Clara, an elementary school teacher, with an easy smile and contagious laughter. "I hope you don't mind," Daniel said nervously. "I know I should have warned you, but he wanted to see how I would react without preparation," I added. "Clever." Clara blushed. "I said we should call first." "And miss the chance to meet the real Lorraine?" I retorted. "Come in, darling. I always make too much food anyway." During lunch, I observed, not like before, looking for signs of danger, but with genuine curiosity. Clara asked questions about the photos, laughed at Daniel's embarrassing stories, and insisted on helping with the dishes. "Your mother is an icon," she told me while drying the dishes. "I once spent 3 hours touring the city you designed." "Did Daniel tell you about this?" "He talks about everything," she said simply. "That's one of the things I love about him, the way he talks about his family." When they left, Clara hugged me spontaneously. "It was a pleasure to meet you. Daniel was right. You're even better in person." I watched them drive away, Daniel opening the car door for her, chatting animatedly. There was no rush in their movements, no tension in their shoulders, just two people enjoying each other's company. "And," Daniel called that night, "what did you think?" "I liked her. More importantly, I liked who you are with her." "Like this?" "You. Relaxed. Present. You." "It's different," he admitted. "Not better or worse. Just easier. Like breathing." "Love shouldn't be a battle," I agreed. Lesson learned. In the following months, Clara became a regular but not intrusive presence. He came for some lunches, not all. Sometimes Daniel came alone, sometimes with her. There was a balance, respect for individual and shared spaces. "Aren't you jealous?" a friend asked me, "of having to share your son?" "I'm not dividing," I replied. "I'm multiplying. More love in his life means more love in the world." It was true. Seeing Daniel happy, healthily happy, was its own reward. Watching him build something solid yet flexible, intimate but not suffocating, was witnessing all of life's lessons being applied. 2 years after that terrible dinner, I sat on this balcony again. Daniel had called earlier, excited. "Clara and I are getting married," he announced, "but this time it's different. I want your help with everything. Clara wants it too. In fact, she insists." "When?" "Spring, in 6 months. Enough time to plan, to do it right." "In the garden?" I asked, already imagining it. "If you let her. Clara loves her garden." "It would be an honor." After hanging up, I stood observing the garden. The roses that had almost died had bloomed again. The seedlings I had tried to save on that rainy day were now robust plants. The garden, like everything else, had survived and thrived. Beatrice called me last week. We hadn't spoken in over a year. "Simone is in therapy," she said without preamble. Finally, after destroying another relationship. "I am really sorry." "Don't feel bad. It was necessary. She's getting better. Slowly, but she is." "And you?" "We're talking. Not much, but it's a start. She told me about her conversation with you. She said it was a turning point. Everyone deserves a chance to change." "Yes," Beatrice agreed. "Everyone deserves it." This morning, while I was having coffee on the balcony, Daniel showed up unexpectedly. It wasn't Wednesday or Sunday. "Day off," he explained. "I thought I'd stop by to see my favorite mom." His only mother. That's why she's the favorite. No competition. He sat down next to me, helping himself to coffee from the thermos that I always keep full. "To what do I owe the honor?" "Clara is pregnant," he said simply. "We found out yesterday." The coffee almost came back up through my nose. "Daniel!" "I know. It wasn't in the immediate plans, but..." He smiled, that smile that lit up his whole face. "We're happy. Scared but happy. I'm going to be a grandmother." The weight of the words hit me. "Oh, Daniel." "She's going to be an amazing grandmother. Clara is already making lists of everything she wants to learn from you." "Is it too early?" 12 weeks. That's why we waited to tell you." I hugged my son, feeling the circle complete. Life generating life. Love generating love. "Do you know what I thought when she told me?" Daniel asked, still in the embrace. "What?" What I want is for my son or daughter to have what I had, a family. Not perfect, but present. Not suffocating, but safe. Not isolated, but connected. It will happen, I promised. You will ensure that. We're all going, he corrected. Family is a collective project. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the day dawn over the garden. In a few months, there would be a wedding here. In a few more months, a child would run among the flowers, life going on, renewing itself, reinventing itself. Mother, try? Remember what you said that Sunday? That they had taken everything from you, but you kept the truth? I remember. You were wrong. I looked at him, surprised. They didn't take anything from you, he explained. They tried, but they couldn't. Because what we have, what we are to each other, cannot be taken away. It can be hidden, neglected, even denied for a while, but not taken away. It has always been here, waiting. The tears came without warning, tears of gratitude, of relief, of love that transcends words. When did you become so wise? I must have pulled someone along. He winked, and so we arrive at the present, sitting on this balcony that has witnessed so much, writing this story that needed to be told, not as a warning or revenge, but as a testament that true love, whether between mother and child, between partners, between generations, is not built on exclusion, but on inclusion. Simone was right about one thing. I was a problem, but not the problem she imagined. I was the problem for false narratives, for forced isolations, for loves that imprison instead of liberate. And in the end, after all the pain and confusion, what remained was exactly what had always been there. A mother who loves her son, a son who loves his mother, and the understanding that this love does not diminish any other love. It only multiplies it. The truth, after all, wasn't my victory over them. The truth was that there never was them to begin with. There were only wounded people repeating patterns until someone had the courage to say, enough is enough. And this courage, I discovered, is the true meaning of maternal love. Not the love that possesses, but the love that liberates. Not the love that demands choices, but the love that expands possibilities. Not the love that holds on with fear, but the love that embraces with confidence. They took everything from me, and yet, in the end, I was the one who kept the truth. And the truth, my dears, is that true love always finds its way back home.